Okay, we are live. It is just about 11:30, and for today's Grease Grease World podcast, we're going to pivot a little bit into more of the oil, although there will be grease discussed. Because what I want to focus on here is a update that's out there for turbine lube oil systems. And so this is the document. Okay, this is the EPRI document, and I kind of showed that in the announcement for this. It's the turbine generator auxiliary systems, and that's how they kind of break it down to where you find the lube oil system. But it is the turbine generator lubrication system maintenance guide. Now, this had been last updated in 2012, and now we see that a lot has changed in the last, I guess it's almost 14 years since that update. We updated it late last year, got this published. And for those of you that are in the industry, in the power generation industry, you'll be familiar with EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute, and you'll know that this is the research arm for the industry that gets funded by the industry. And I believe the Department of Energy is in there somewhere as well. And the members who fund this research are then eligible at no additional cost to get the copies. So that's the document you're looking for. And what is of value here is the number, the report number. So it's this big. I'm going to put this in the follow-up comments to this LinkedIn, and it's 300-2027-369. So if you get on the EPRI website and you search for that, what you'll find if you are not logged in or not a member is that it's it's going to be very expensive, and it's not meant to be basically sold at this point to the general public. It's meant to be available for those utilities and other participants who are funding this research. And so, but what you do find is that somewhere down the road, it could be anywhere in the 5 to 10 year time period, then it does become general knowledge. But for right now, it's really timely for those folks who are responsible for operating these assets. So we're talking about multi-million, $100 million assets. We're talking about nuclear power plants, gas-fired power plants, or combined cycle plants. There's still some coal plants out there and some oil-fired units as well, but it's a steam-driven turbine that we're talking about. And these lube oil systems are some of the most complex lube oil systems that you will see in any kind of design that's out there. So what we've done is we've taken that historical document and all the key sections that you find there, and then have updated that just in terms of the scope. You see here that, driving question, what are the key components of the lubrication system? How do they work? And what you find in the document is it's broken down into the different OEMs or manufacturers. So you've got Siemens, you got GE, you've got ABB. So you've got a number of these. Mitsubishi is in there. So a number of these different ones that are, dominant in the industry. And, since that time, since the 2012 time, a lot has happened, right? There's been a fairly significant increase in the occurrence of and the focus on varnish forming, especially in gas turbine systems. And so we catch up in this latest release with the technology that's there, the understanding that's there about varnish and how it is being formed. We also update in there what tools are available from a lube oil analysis perspective to detect, quantify, and identify varnish. And then what do you do about it? like what are the tools that are available, and it goes through the various kind of filtration purification type options that are out there. Some of them have really advanced in over the last 10 years to 14 years, as well as the newer approaches that we see where solubility enhancers, so basically additives or solvent like materials are added to the lube oil system to resolubilize varnish so that it is not problematic in the operation of the turbine. So that's in there as well. We have a discussion on that. So some of the stuff here is new. It wasn't even talked about or mentioned, in the previous edition, but in the 2015 one now it's dealt with. We also added in here as well the grease analysis, because yes, it talks about main turbine lube oil, but also the auxiliary systems as well. So within that, you're going to have lift pumps or jacking pumps. You're going to have emergency oil pumps, right? So if there's a trip or a loss of power, you want to safely allow that turbine to wind down. So you're going to have secondary pumps that are maybe operating off a DC current and a battery bank. But a lot of these are going to then have electric motors and are going to be grease lubricated. So we do introduce as a new approach, being able to take grease samples and analyze them, and be able to monitor these critical auxiliary systems as well. So I'm catching up on that. Not everybody that's hearing me is going to be able to act on that. Not everybody has access to it. It's pretty limited to that access. But I wanted to share that, and also that there's some upcoming events. So next week, EPRI has the CBM, or Condition-Based Maintenance Users Group meeting down in Clearwater, Florida, and I'll be heading down to that on Sunday. So Sunday to Thursday, I'll be participating in that event. And it's a really helpful event, and I hope that I'm able to reach some of the younger people in our industry that are just getting started, and they find themselves responsible for whether it's lubrication or lubricant analysis, oil analysis, grease analysis, vibration, whatever it is, or they're finding themselves as system managers for the turbine systems, and now they have to look at the lube oil system as a function of that. When I first started going to the EPRI conferences, it's like 30 some years ago, but I instantly found that these were some of the most valuable meetings that I could attend, primarily because everyone attending there um, had similar challenges, right? Might be the nuclear plant, or it might be a component that, goes nuclear and fossil and so forth. But we're sharing those experiences, and sometimes how close the challenge was of a colleague was quite remarkable. In fact, I went to one of these CBM user group meetings. At the time, it was called iRug for infrared specifically, and I sat down at a table, and there might have been 20 of us around the table, all from various power plants, and talking about infrared thermography and challenges we had. And then we took a break, and when we came back from the break, I looked over and I saw an infrared picture that I had taken of a component in my plant. But I guess it had been slid over. And so I reached for it, and the fellow next to me said, do you need to see that? I said, that's mine. And he goes, no, 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 it's mine. And here, what we found out was we came to this meeting with the exact same problem, that we had high temperature fuses in a control room panel that we had found, both had taken pictures of. And when you put our pictures side by side, they were practically identical. And in that meeting, we were able to find out that this was too much of a coincidence, that these were not problems. These were actually design heating within these fuses. These were quick blow fuses. And so they had fuse links in there, heaters in there, that were heating up the fuses a certain amount, even with normal current. And so you kind of, get this opportunity to talk to people that have a job like yours. And that's where I think that young people, if they are starting their career out or they're just getting responsibility for some of these big systems or use of the technology to monitor the systems, it can be one of the most valuable conferences to attend. So that's CBM UG or CBMUG is a way to abbreviate it. And that's next week. And that's where there's a vibration VTF, they call it. So it's like a vibration technology forum. So you kind of break off into that group. There's a lubrication focus, which is on lubricant analysis and some of the other challenges that come up through lubrication. The infrared group is still part of that. So you get all these opportunities to kind of float back and forth. And as time is going on, more people are now responsible for multiple technologies, and so this becomes a very focused conference for folks that have that responsibility. So I'm going to be there next week. I'm going to be talking about mostly around greases and grease analysis and grease sampling. I'm going to be talking about power plant specific applications for greases, things like the motor operated valves, grease lubricated motor operated valves. And we're actually doing a lot of that analysis right now with a nuclear power plant that is being restarted. And so those samples come to the lab. We send kits out with specific tools that allow you to take targeted samples from those assets. And we have this history of, of the analysis results, and we're able to find and determine the issues that are out there. And it's other components like electric motors, pillowbox bearings, and so forth. That's next week. And then I just made the decision today to head to the Turbine-Generator users group. So that one's TGUG. So it's CBMUG and TGUG, all these abbreviations that you find in some of these industries. But the TGUG is in August, second or third week of August in Kansas City, expecting about 200 representatives of that particular industry, power generation, turbine generator systems, so steam turbines, gas turbines, etc. And we're going to come there and really focus on what has changed with this new publication. And it's just a wonderful resource, really at no additional cost for the people who are working at these plants, whose companies are funding this kind of research. And it's just good to know what's out there, because you get a new start. And one thing that I have seen over time is that the turnover from the older guys like myself that have been doing it for years to the new guys sometimes is like an afternoon, right? Oh, by the way, you're leaving today. Well, this is the guy that's taking your place. And that's all the time you have for kind of transition and turnover. It's really not ideal. So having a guide like this can be really helpful to someone that's just trying to get, their feet under them, want to know where to focus. And so this particular guide for the turbine generator systems, the lube oil systems, like I said, goes into the various different providers, the OEMs, the manufacturers. Yeah, just to refresh myself, it's what is it? It goes through all the different systems that you'll see, including, like I said, the auxiliary systems, and then it goes into like GE, Westinghouse, Alstom, Mitsubishi, and Toshiba. They're all dealt with in a degree of detail, like in differentiating these the different components that make up these systems. They're similar, but they're not identical. And so knowing sometimes it's terminology difference. Sometimes there's pretty significant design differences. So all of that information is in there about them. And I was able to get the the input of some key people, Randy Steele and Jim Whiters, who with a lot of Jim with a fantastic amount of knowledge there, and bring his knowledge in about some of these systems and some of the things that you typically see and some of the challenges and problems. So it really serves a great purpose there. And particularly, I was able to to contribute a lot in terms of the preventive maintenance review and seeing how we bring that up to date, condition monitoring discussions, equipment troubleshooting using oil analysis and grease analysis as part of that. Sampling and analysis, sampling approaches, right? Like, how do I get the representative sample? And one component that we added in here was a little more discussion about microbes, and how microbial contamination can be an issue with these turbine oil systems. It doesn't happen a lot, but when it does, it is a major impact. Sometimes you see systems shut down for months or years because of what it takes to kind of undo all the damage of microbial populations making their way and setting up house all through a system like that. So it is really good to know what tools are out there and what you can use to discover that early in the process and do something about it. And so, interestingly enough, while I was working on, updating this document and editing it and writing it, we had a sample come into the lab from a steam turbine system. And sure enough, we looked at the filters from this system that were being clogged. Couldn't find out why. There was no dirt in the system. Here it was a microbial slime system, this material that had gotten through the system and was concentrating in the filters and just blinding the filters. And so, we were able to detect that and help that customer through that issue, putting them in touch with Dr. Fred Passman, who's really the expert when it comes to mitigating microbial contamination in these systems. So again, all that has been, it's timely. So it's in there. It's been added to it. It's a great document. And I will be talking about that in more detail at that Turbine-Generator Users Group meeting, TGUG. Now, for those of you who are still interested in this stuff, I think you can still access the 2012 version of this report, because that was published and is in kind of the public domain. I think if you go to EPRI, I think that's still available. I'm not 100% sure. You can try it, but it's possible when this one got published, maybe they took the other one down, not sure. But again, this is really helpful for those folks who are in these industries, working for these companies that are funding EPRI and its work, and they can get access to it. So I wanted to share that with you and just give you an update what's coming next few weeks for me and for us. When I go to TGUG, I'm also going to be visiting there with Scott Danahauer. So Scott Danahauer is someone that some of you may have crossed paths with before. Spent his whole career in the power generation industry. Started with me at Peach Bottom when he was focusing on vibration analysis. I was doing infrared and lubrication analysis, and then Scott went to like the central Chesterbrook location. Eventually, he ended up at Power Labs, and it goes from Philadelphia Electric when we first started, and then it became Pico and Pico Energy, and then it became Exelon for a while. That's what it was changing to when I left. And then more recently, a lot of those power plants are now part of Constellation. And so Scott transitioned through that, ended up spending the last part of his career, many years, as the manager at Constellation's Power Labs facility. So he was responsible, had oversight, and was responsible for all sorts of laboratory related work being done there. Some of it was on the electrical testing side, some of it was metrology related, some of it was metallurgy. And so he had a team of metallurgists working for him there and doing root cause failure analysis. So great experience. We're lucky enough to have been able to hire him on and bring him on to MRG Labs, and so that really just fills out our bench. So when you think about choosing a laboratory for testing your lubricants, there's a lot that's going to drive that. Maybe it's location and turnaround time. Maybe it's you're driven by cost because you really have a certain budget for that and whatnot. But if you really are looking for value from the effort that you put into taking samples and sending them off to a laboratory, um, there's a lot of laboratories you can choose, but there's only one that has four professionals on staff that previously worked in the power generation industry, were responsible for these systems, working in the maintenance department, working in a testing department, or working for operations and actually operating turbine oil systems. And we have four people with over 100 years combined experience. So when you're sending, a really critical sample like a turbine lube oil sample, it's maybe not time to try to find the lowest cost for that because it's all about value, right? You've got tens of millions to hundreds of millions value locked up in those assets, and it's that's where you really want to find the information that's going to help you make good decisions. So to the extent that it's challenging now because we don't have as many people operating these facilities. You don't maybe have if you've had the gray wave and a lot of the experienced people have left with MRG Labs. You've got those experienced folks still out here working, still able to combine our knowledge of being an employee responsible for these systems and knowing exactly what your challenge is. And so we build that into our response. We can have those discussions to help you understand what are the important things to be doing, making sure you're getting good data and then making good decisions all the way through the decision process, because we'll get drawn into meeting discussions and we'll dial in or we'll be a part of a Teams meeting as we're talking about what we're seeing, why we're getting certain samples of what we're seeing in the results. It's just another level of comprehension and understanding. We know what your job is. We know what the challenges are. We've done it ourselves, and now we're here to do it for you when you send your samples to us. So that's what we've got coming up. A couple of good conferences there. Wanted to share the updates on this manual with you. I see William Sloan joined here and gave some comments. Thank you, William, for sitting in here. And everybody else that is either live or is going to check this out later. Thank you for taking the time to look at this. Again, reach out to myself or Scott Danahauer, Ron Jansen, Dave Seith. Reach out to us. We're the guys that have that experience. You can direct message me through LinkedIn if you got a question, or want to look at some data together, or if you're ready to have your oil samples and grease samples coming to a lab that gets it, that's been there, that's done it, and is ready to walk alongside you in that challenge you have of supporting these critical systems. So thanks for your time today. Have a good rest of the week. And I will see folks next week in Clearwater at the CBM Users Group meeting. Take care.